I am here with Adriana Forte, who was recommended by Layman Pascal, who he described as a developmental thinker who does menstrual futurism, talking about cyclical and phase-based thinking, and just some critiques of the modern system cutting against that grain, and maybe some intimations of what a different idea of a different system might look like in that. Thanks for coming on, Adriana.
Yeah, pleasure. Nice to be here.
You're uh, you're in Australia, right?
Yeah, I'm in Australia, but I'm
Uh,
Brazilian. Yeah.
but you're Brazilian in Australia. That's an interesting international combination. I'm an Irish person in Ireland. It's very boring. What part of Australia are you in?
I'm in a little town called Bellingen, 6 hours up from Sydney. So in a little community, rural community in Australia.
Bellingen. Yeah, is that south of Newcastle or is that north of?
That's north of Newcastle.
Trying to think. I stayed in an intentional community there when I was in Australia
Oh,
called what is it? Not Bundegen. Yeah, but it was
yeah, it's very close
yeah.
to me. Oh,
Oh,
wow.
really?
Yeah, I mean, not very close, an hour away. Yeah.
Because I think I might have had to go to Ballingen to get there.
Yeah,
I remember I
yeah,
had
yeah.
to get a
You
train and
would have.
then
Yeah, you would
y
have.
yeah, 'cause I no, I didn't see Ballingen 'cause I think I was just at the train station and then the guy I was doing, Helpex. I don't know if you know that, but it's
Oh,
like,
wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so this guy, he's a somatics, Zenergetic somatics was his thing. So he picked me up and then I stayed at his for a couple of weeks and we were getting up at 5 in the morning doing like Tibetan yoga. And yeah, it was really cool. I told him I could do carpentry, so he was like really
Yeah,
excited. And
yeah.
I'd done woodwork in school, and that was about the limit of the thing. But yeah, really beautiful part of the world, actually. Really nice
Yeah.
spot.
Oh, wow, that's amazing that you know the region. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah, like
beautiful.
Ballingen, because I was like, is that the place? But yeah, I guess yeah. Because there's another. What's the place? Is a Bundaberg, or what's where the drink is from? Or
Oh,
there's
yeah,
like
but
a
that's much further north.
yeah. It's like that might even be Queensland, is it? Or is it still?
Yeah,
Is it
that's
still?
Queensland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. How did you end up in Australia? What brought you there?
Well, it was more like I met my partner in India, so it was an unfolding of a different story because I was in Hong Kong. I had left Brazil already. I was in Hong Kong, and then I got married in Hong Kong, and then I got divorced in Hong Kong, and I went to India to practice yoga. And then I met this English guy in India and we traveled India together and then we had to figure out where to live and he didn't want to go back to England, I didn't want to go back to Brazil, and he had a residency in Australia, and Australia was kind of like a little bit like Brazil but a bit more orderly and a little bit like England but with a good weather and beautiful nature. So we kind of ended up here and now we have 2 kids and we lived in Sydney before and now we just made a move to a more, we're on the land and we live in a off-grid house and
Oh wow.
by the river. So we just some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we're just having the breakdown from modernity. Was having 2 little kids and it wasn't quite working. I mean, I don't think it works for many people, but just people cope differently with not working. And I think that for us was just like, let's try something different. And by no means I'm saying it's perfect, but the way that we were doing, like my partner doing the 9 to 5 thing and I doing the whole day with the kids, because if I found a little, if I found a little job, it meant that I would have to pay somebody to stay with my kids, and that never makes sense to me. It's like it's a weird thing, but um, anyway, so we were just like, okay, let's try to see if there's people doing things a bit differently, and then we moved here, and there's a bunch of people trying to do. It's not perfect because when we're kind of trying to pilot a new way of living, you're always giving up something that modernity offered you that's more comfortable or that's more secure, inverted commas. So we had to figure out all sorts of um, new ways of living or making money, all these things because we're like we're far from town, not super far from town, but we are in a community that was created 45 years ago. So there wasn't internet, there wasn't any of this stuff. So the people that created this community really opted out when they moved here. And they, mm, you know, um, made a lot of mistakes, but tried lots of new things. And now we're trying to move that energy a little bit forward into the future, which has its own complications and delights, and yeah. So that's
So
where.
was it the because I guess that's a really interesting entry point to your work. Was it having kids that kind of sparked the critique of modernity and the seeing how like the mismatch between, I guess, the human rhythm and the living rhythm? Was that what really opened it up for you, or were you already very much on this journey?
Yeah, I think when I wanted to get pregnant and um, I started to just inquire more into my relationship with my body, and be really honest with the relationship I had with my body prior to getting pregnant. I was like, I haven't had much to do with it. I mean, modernity basically makes it okay for you to just be a walking head, even if you're a woman.
Mm.
And um, but if you're a woman, it's the price you pay is very big, and I don't think that a lot of us women we don't take that into account, like the severity of it. But I was on the pill for 10 years before, because it's just so normalized. We don't even see it that we're playing with the female psyche. We don't even see what we're doing, and so I was just uh my mom got pregnant when she was younger, so of course she corrected with me. She wanted me on the pill quite young, and my aunt is a gynecologist obstetrician, so she was trained by men to intervene in labor and intervene in she wasn't trained like a midwife to just understand women's rhythms. She was trained to intervene, right? So I was brought up by that culture, and so it's a lot of fear upon the body, a lot of fear of, like, why would you try to give birth naturally? Why would you do that? Go back to the Middle Ages. So when I moved to Australia, when came to Australia, that viewpoint was very challenged, because I started meeting women that were not rebels. They were just regular people that were having birth naturally. And I was like, oh, so these women are not trying to prove a point. They're just giving birth. And I then started being able to see my culture with much more objectivity, like from a distance. And then I had the realization that that's before trauma language, before all that kind of stuff. I just was aware. I don't know how that happened, but I was very aware that I didn't trust my body. So even if I wanted to give birth naturally, my body probably wouldn't do it, because birth, like, sex, birth, and death, like, there are all sorts of things that you need to open up. You need to trust the environment. You need to trust to relax, to be able to go through with something. And if you don't have that, then I could see that just thinking about giving birth naturally, I contract my body. So my body was in fear about that, because it was what was normalized in my culture was um, intervention. So prior to me getting pregnant, most of my friends and people that I knew that had had babies had had intervention in labor, and even in Brazil,
Is
it's
this like epidural, or is this just even just going to into a medicalized kind of setting, or what do you mean by
not just
intervention?
epidural. I mean, epidural in Brazil is considered normal birth. So I'd say natural birth in my setting, which is a birth without any intervention. I probably don't know anyone, or just very few in Brazil in my circles that went there. Now, normal birth is what we call in Brazil. Normal birth is the one with intervention, but it's vaginal, so it'll be vaginal birth. Whereas a lot of my circle was cesarean, like the people that I know
Mm.
was cesarean section. And in Brazil, the rate of cesarean, the time I gave birth, was something ridiculous. In the private sector, was something like 80% of people that have money or possibilities. They would opt.
80%.
Yeah, it was super high.
Wow.
So a lot of people, and in my circles, booked cesarean. So is when, you book ahead of time when you're gonna have the birth, so you don't go through the normal process of contractions. that was quite normalized too. So
I thought cesarean, and I guess I'm kind of naive. I thought that was like a last resort kind of thing rather than, or maybe it used to be that way. I'm not sure, but
I think maybe in your culture, in some cultures it's true. In some cultures, the midwifery, I think in Scandinavia, I think in England and Ireland and maybe Scotland. I think in some cultures you're right, and in some other cultures, like my culture, takes a lot of things from America and the very medicalized models, and we have less money as a culture. So I think that it's changing because I had my first kid. She's 15 now, so it was 15 years ago, and I was getting pregnant, 16 years ago. So it's changing in Brazil, but at that time it was very medicalized, and having a booked cesarean wasn't seen as a last resort. It was a practice that some people opted because why not? Why wouldn't you do that? So I think I started investigating because fair enough, people would say if you have those medical interventions available to you, why would you put yourself in a situation that is, let's call it inverted commas, risky and painful? So why would you choose that? So that's the inquiry that I started, which, you know,
I guess
for
you're coming from a culture where, yeah, 80% of births are cesarean, so that's completely normalized. And then if you're questioning that at all, then yeah, like that, you're already at a starting point where it's like it had gone so far towards, yeah, an interventionist thing that, yeah, any kind of questioning was already going to open up all these questions because yeah, I mean, you could have, I guess, just gone that way, but yeah, you're once you begin to think about it and because I've actually chatted to a couple of friends in the last month who were C-section babies, and I guess they're aware of what can happen with that, where I guess is there autoimmune, not autoimmune stuff, but like, or yeah, just your immune system from natural birth. There's a whole thing with that, and
me,
allergies are much more common, and even like shape of skull apart. Like there's all these things that I was like, oh, I never would have thought about that, but then yeah, I
I
guess
think you're
there
getting to a
is.
very good point. I think you're getting to a very good point because I think that a lot of my work that started back then, but it was just because by trade, I'm a journalist, and I don't do journalism anymore, but the mind of a journalist is still in me, or the mind of a philosopher, or somebody that asks questions and doesn't settle for, oh, that's how we do it. I'm just like, but why? But
Yeah,
why? But why? But why? So when I started going on that route of but why, like the hole is really deep. And it's way before birth, and it's way before, it starts. Then I got introduced to a teacher in Australia called Jane Collins, and she was a home birth midwife. She was a midwife, and then she started seeing that in her work, women would have, when they would have medical interventions, they would say thank you to the doctor. They'll be very thankful. They wouldn't see that somehow their agency had been robbed, inverted commas. So she started investigating that. So she started seeing how the patterns start from her perspective, her patterns start in a woman in the first period. And when a woman has her first period, like we come to a rite of passage. We come from modernity's a culture that has no understanding of rites of passages. So that's for men and women, and that's a big problem. And there's a lot of work being done by people like Bill Plotkin or different people that do rites of passages work, and they show how, you know in indigenous cultures you would understand that you would send the boy or the kid out, and you would have to have a certain scaffolding and ritual and practice to when that boy came changed, because he would have to go through challenges, and when he came changed, the culture would receive this boy changed and would evoke in him the the new capacities that he acquired by doing the challenges, and then he would have to be that man. He wouldn't perform the same roles as a little boy. He would start performing roles as a man. So for women it's a different thing, but the first period, she's the little kid boy and the little kid girl, they have similar. So I look at everything now from the lens of rhythm. So I'm writing a book, and I'm choosing rhythm as an angle to enter these conversations, because they can be so tricky, and so we can collapse very quickly into oh, but men do that too, or women do that too. So I'm trying to just do rhythm, because it's a way that I can isolate the male and female psyche, or I call it the production of our subjectivity. If we look at the production of our subjectivity through the lenses of rhythm, we can see that boys and girls have pretty much the same rhythm prior to um, the onset
The
of
first
teenagehood.
period, or yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So prior to the first period, and prior to the onset of like peaks of testosterone for boys. So of course the boys had surges of testosterone before, and when they're but their rhythm is pretty much, similar.
When you
Subthreshold
talk
level
about rhythms, you mean like their moods,
circadian
their oh, okay.
are operating by the circadian rhythm. And we have the sun on the day, the moon at night, and it gets dark, and melatonin is produced at night, and cortisol peaks in the morning. So we're both pretty much um having our lives with that. But then when it hits puberty, for a girl, the menstrual cycle, and it's a becoming. She doesn't have her cycle in order, like inverted commas, as soon as she gets her first period. It's erratic for a while. She's becoming a cyclical creature, let's call it. And that's a lot of the girls get very confused, inverted commas, at that time, because it is confusing, because
So you're saying the length of cycle isn't consistent at first?
it's
Like
not consistent. No, not
I did
consistent.
not know that.
It's not consistent. She doesn't ovulate for a while. For some girls, it takes up to 5 years to regulate that. Sometimes she doesn't produce much progesterone because she doesn't ovulate. There's all sorts of big of mechanisms. They're learning how to develop, and then at some point she starts being cyclical. She starts having a pattern of cycle, which is
And is that all different for different girls, women? Like, is there different rates at which it normalizes, or is
yeah.
there a kind of patterns?
Absolutely. There's different rates, and it's super under researched. So we have like from 2 to 5 years, but for some, so
That's
we
a
don't
wide window for a teenager.
we
That's like
don't really
half
know.
of your adolescence.
Exactly. We don't really know much, because we're okay with very broad strokes. Like that's why I'm so interested in it. I think we're not asking a lot of very interesting questions of that phase. But then we do have girls going like, getting shocked, because they come from a culture that doesn't teach them anything about it. Then their moms haven't taught them anything about it. Their grandmothers haven't taught them anything about it. So then they come from what I say, a ruptured lineage of that type of learning. And then they land themselves in a culture that has a mechanistic model of like reality, like the birth intervention being one of them, but there's our allopathic medicine being one of them, even the fact that our gynecologist obstetricians are trained in a way that they don't really understand the cycle. And I can have a male doctor telling me about my body, but he never felt what I feel. Like all of that feels really um, confusing, but it's all unchecked. Like we don't check those things. So then women go to gynecologists to tell her when she's ovulating. We don't know how to track our own bodies. So then what that kind of like lack of awareness that's from the woman, inherited by her lineage of women behind her, without blaming anyone, just like that's the culture we inherit, unconsciously we inherit a pattern of like not knowing anything like that. And then when we have our first period, so that for us is a rite of passage, we land in a culture that doesn't evoke in us, doesn't ask of us to behave in a different way. So we are still um, we are required to behave in a way that would be okay, much more okay for the male body than for the female body. So then that starts producing a subjectivity that starts being making her own body ada. Like, so a woman starts going, she learns how to put pads or tampons or whatever, and really regulate the practical aspect of menstruation. But she doesn't really, she never thinks that her mind is cyclical. She never, and because it moves so slowly, inverted commas, she's building estrogen slowly in the follicular phase until it kind of peaks in ovulation. She has like for 4-day window. Around that window, she's got peak in estrogen and peak in testosterone. So in that tiny window, she would be what modernity calls uh, a a good, intelligent woman. Like they like her in that little tiny
So
window
you
when
get
she's
4 days a month as a good citizen of modernity, and the rest of the month is like, you're in
kind of.
rebellion against your body, or you're in rebellion against society. Yeah.
Absolutely, like, that's the thing. For most women, they don't, for a lot of her life, because if that's the water she's swimming in, for most of her life she doesn't question modernity. It's just what it is, right? And then she needs to find a job, she plays sports, she goes to a therapist. Whatever she's doing has a model of psyche or normality, that the model is trying to bring her back into that model of normality that doesn't suit her cyclicity, doesn't suit her cyclical nature. So then she starts already being producing her subjectivity based on all of that. So most women that I work with, they would what happens for a lot of women is that they feel okay, they feel good when they're coping. And for example, just a simple example, estrogen copes better with stress hormones than progesterone. So i- in the
When you say
follicular,
copes better, I like you.
you can deal better with stress. So you can deal better
Okay,
with
yeah.
alcohol, drugs, somebody being annoying to you, a boss, telling you to do something that you didn't do, or even you trying to do a task that you can't quite do. You cope better with that during the estrogen phase. So some people call it the accommodating hormone, because it accommodates better to the context you're in. Whereas progesterone accommodates less well, and it in a balanced, if we took that cycle not as a problem but as a mechanism of course correction, then it's like, if progesterone is not coping well with this, that's interesting. Maybe should I be doing that? Should I not be doing that? Is my body wrong, or is the maybe I shouldn't be drinking alcohol these days. Maybe I shouldn't be in such a stressful situation these days. So is when a woman actually learns how to live, and there are schools now that teach girls and how to live according to their cycles, which I'm not even saying it's the future. The very deep future is a culture that just takes all of that. Like it's okay for us to be what we are, but for now, because a girl doesn't even know that she has that inside her, if she doesn't learn how to map that, she's constantly feeling that she's wrong, apart from some days of the month when she actually can cope with what's asked of her. And the
Mm.
rest of the time, the psychotherapeutic models will say that a woman has more tendency for neuroticism, which is this self-deprecating view of self, and men have more tendency to narcissism. And to me, the hormones, they would match that. Testosterone goes out, and it's in inverted commas reliable. It matches the peak in cortisol in the morning and the dip of cortisol at night. So testosterone has the same rhythm.
There's a
So
consistency
it's
to that can
consistency.
fit into a linear kind of, yeah.
Exactly. Whereas for the woman, as soon as she has the menstrual cycle on top of her circadian rhythm, it adds a layer of complexity that modernity just doesn't take into account. It's too complex, you know? So,
Can we unpack it a bit? 'Cause
yeah,
I yeah. I'm probably gonna betray how little I know, but maybe that's a useful thing.
that's
But
great.
because you've mentioned estrogen and progesterone. You mentioned the follicular stage and I guess ovulation. So can you give me a map of the different stages of the cycle and the different hormonal things going on at those stages?
Yes, absolutely. So I I'll say what is known, and I think, and I'll just rephrase that. For example, maybe in 10 years' time, if we have this conversation, if more research is um, done, we'll find out that's much more nuanced than what I'm saying, and that's what I'm actually holding. I'm holding like what I'm bringing in is not perfect. I don't think it's perfect, but it's better than what we've got. What we've got is
Is there
really bad.
really that little research that we
It's
have
very
done on
little.
this?
It's very
Wow.
little. You will be surprised, James, because it's because the complexity, because the allopathic model of medicine, um, all the research, a lot of the research, I think until the 90s, I don't remember the date, but it's like until the 90s was all done in male bodies because it's just more consistent. Like to get a lot of women in different phases of the cycle to try a medicine is just so costly that because of cost and funding and even the inquiry itself, now that we have more women scientists, more women doctors, the sense of not fitting in is coming more to light, and then there's more research being done, but it's still underfunded because it takes more. It just takes more. But I can share with you a little bit of what we know and what I observe to be true. So, for
Yeah,
example,
please.
so we have the follicular phase, and the follicular phase starts on. So we have the menstruation. Some people separate in 4 phases. So menstruation, so which will be day one of the cycle, is when you first have your period and you're bleeding. Is day one of the cycle, and then women vary their cycles. It can be anything from like 32 days to 29 days to 25 days, a short cycle, and that woman um, a healthy woman should have a regular cycle. A lot of us don't have it because we're coping all the time with modernity. So it's okay these days. It's very normalized to say, my cycle has been irregular forever." But we don't see that as a problem. In Chinese medicine, it is a problem. We should all be rhythmic, and our rhythm would change from anytime from a short cycle to a long cycle. But if we're having short, long, what it's pointing to a lack of rhythm in our bodies, that it's already a byproduct of modernity. So our follicular phase goes, then it builds estrogen and it starts building and building and increasing, just like the moon cycle that you have from the new moon. The moon is like a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger until it gets to the full moon. And the full moon, so a few days before the full moon is already when it peaks in estrogen and testosterone, and then that's the
In
pre-ovulatory
each in estrogen and you say testosterone or progesterone?
testosterone,
In
both.
testosterone,
So,
okay,
so
yeah.
estrogen and testosterone are match made in heaven
Right.
for modernity. It's like you have all the qualities that modernity loves about women. She's more sensual, she's more sexy, she's more eloquent. Her face is more symmetrical. Her brain hemispheres, communicate better. So they're all the characteristics that modernity values, which is sexiness, beauty, all that kind of stuff, and eloquence, being able to articulate yourself in a linear way. All of that is more available to women when testosterone and estrogen is at a higher peak. And then after that phase, after ovulation, it begins the descent journey of the hormones. So it's less estrogen starts dipping, and then progesterone starts being produced, and then and the third week in the fourth week of the cycle, progesterone peaks, and progesterone is a very calming hormone. It should be a very calming hormone. So there are two things happening with women in modernity that we consider normal, and it's not. It's a pathology of modernity, which is um, a lot of modern women have very low progesterone. So they have very little calming hormone. So it gets them much more wired, and they have very little calming hormone because adrenaline and cortisol, like if you have a lot of stress hormones in your body, the sex hormones don't take precedence. Like the first thing that your body needs is to be safe. So it's gonna try to bring you back to safety. So if you're not safe, you don't need to produce sex hormones. So for women, the sex hormones are very erratic in modernity because a modern woman going 9 to 5 to work and leaving their kids in daycare and all the normal day-to-day practices that we have built modernity upon is stressful for a female body. So women are pumped by stress hormones. So we have less estrogen production. And women that produce progesterone production. And also the women that do have progesterone and produce progesterone copes less well with stress. So if these women are in stressful environments, which again, they are because if your boss is requiring of you the same woman every day, some days it's totally fine for you to do that presentation in front of 100 people, and some days it's not. And if you can't say that, it's just there's no space for us to say that we're better in different capacities. We have different capacities in different moments. So then we're trying to be the same and very predictable and perform the same role every day. So this woman is in stress. So then she progesterone copes less well with stress hormones, which means she lashes out. So, for example, there's even a research, and I forgot, I should know the name of this woman because she's very interesting. She was doing a research on girls at risk, girls that committed crime, like teenager women that committed crime. And she was noticing that these girls would commit crime, and a lot of them would have their periods in prison right after they were arrested. So
Mm.
they would then she started teaching these women. I mean, it's basic. It's like menstrual cycle for dummies, but our inverted commas, like our modernity is so not aware of it that it becomes a massive thing. So these girls started tracking their cycles with color. She would give them just track with color and your emotional patterns and how dark you feel inside. Put dark colors. And over 3 or 4 months, these girls started seeing consistently that the time that they committed crime was in the fourth week of their cycle, because exactly the phase when drugs and alcohol and stress, you can't cope with that. You don't have the capacity, don't have the bandwidth. Your nervous system
So
is
this is
already
when progesterone is at its peak then, is it? This is
should be, yeah, that in a
or
normal
should
form
be at its peak.
it should be at its peak. So it could be either that these girls don't have enough progesterone and it's totally just completely, or both, that they have progesterone and the progesterone is just going, I can't cope with that level of stress in this moment. And then when they bleed, when they have their periods, they feel relief. They don't feel the stress to, it's like a pressure cooker, like the valve letting steam out. So then at that point, the girls wouldn't have committed the crime. They wouldn't have felt so stressed under the same stressful situation.
So
So,
what's happening there when you have your period? Is the progesterone just gone, or like is that what's happening hormonally?
so everything dips. Everything is at the lowest. But it's there is a sense, I don't think we understand that very well also, but there is a felt experience that a lot of us feel, and I felt, now I'm perimenopause, menopausal, so I'm not bleeding consistently, and there's a completely different rite of passage there
Mm.
also.
Which I
But
assume the research is probably not great on either, I imagine.
not great either. So then so it dips, but the felt experience for women is and I think the felt experience for women is of a lot of tension. For a lot of us that have to cope with modernity, we feel what modernity calls the PMS, or the premenstrual tension that has become a pathology. Like some women, you even have a different name to it. Like there's a
So modernity, for all its for all its attempts to knock us into line, it can't do its job. So we've had a glitch, but we are back. But we don't know we don't know where we ended. So yeah, yeah, I know we were talking about the different parts of the cycle, and then we were talking about the progesterone dip. Yeah, when the period starts, and then we were talking about criminality. So I think we were somewhere in that
Yeah,
domain, and
yeah.
how yeah, um, and yeah. Can you yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, look, what I think it's also really interesting, and it's become much more interesting to me. So you can imagine like a woman discovering this stuff about herself. So I had my subjectivity in a particular way, and I always felt a little bit wrong, like that I wasn't fitting in. So I was judging myself, right? And that's normal. And then but if you it's so hard to because language is so coarse grained. It's so hard to when we're speaking about our own perception of the world and reality, it's very hard to know what really people have in common, or if we're just using the same word to describe something that's quite different. So I think on my journey, through finding out, like, so you're asking about the cycle. So if you can imagine, if you have that type of subjectivity, which, um, for all it's worth, like when I try to explain in my book, e- estrogen and progesterone, they're kind of opposite energies. So they're opposite energies. So we've got in our bodies, we've got the paradox. We've got an upward movement and we've got a downward movement. We've got a more social and accommodating, and we've got a more inward and introspective. So we've got all these energies. And then, of course, the menstruation is the apex of inside and alone and quiet. And you know, for people that see that reality contains much more than what we can see, is when a woman is tapped into, let's say, the mystery. She's much more attuned to very subtle things, very subtle dimensions of reality. Um, and
So what
um,
do you mean by that? Like, what would that look like? Can you give me a concrete example of that?
you know,
Feels like
it's
a
a
very
lot.
masculine question to throw. Give me a concrete example of that.
No, you know, it's fascinating, James. It's just that a lot of the things that I'm saying, like, so for example, if I'm doing a drum journey or whatever journey it is that we're doing, again, because in modernity we assume that we have the same psyches all the time. If a woman just starts mapping her breath work practices or her meditation practices, or when she takes maybe like something that expands her consciousness or whatever it is, like it will interact with her differently depending on where she's at. So when a woman is menstruating, so for me, um I'm attuned to, um it's almost as if there are undercurrents of the instinctual self. They just become really foregrounded. But the way the women in the modern world experience that is that they just get really stressed out. So it's like, I need to be alone. But one of the ways that seeing that is that if you need to be alone, like, what happens, what are you picking up on that when you're not alone feels too much to your body? So the way I see it is that, um, sub thresholds, elements of reality, and be it just like invisible colors, like colors that our normal senses don't pick up, or sounds that our normal senses don't pick up, or just energy patterns that our normal senses don't pick up. She's attuned to that much more deeply. So it can feel like overwhelm. It can feel, because it's like, and again, I don't know I think Taoist practices dip into this a bit. There are ancient traditions that dip into this a bit. To me, it's much more, my way of researching is much more feeling how I felt in my body, and then spending a lot of time with women and asking how they feel in their bodies, and then comparing their answers to the overlay of modernity. You know, like when they say, "Oh, I just go crazy. I can't go to a shopping center when I'm menstruating. I just go crazy." And I'm like, "Tell me about going crazy. What is that like?" Because um, it, the only reason why it's overwhelming is because you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, or you have to develop more subtle capacities to be. It's almost like you're so attuned to the invisible in some way that more starts flooding in. And if you already have a nervous system that's already overcompensating by modernity, then it just becomes too much. It's almost like learning how to surf and being thrown in a big wave. Like you can't start in a big wave surf. So menstruation would be a big wave, and premenstruation could be a big wave for women because their hormones are just really at odds with modernity. So both the premenstrual phase and the menstrual phase, in an archetypal way, like some of us teach, that is, if you compare to the seasons, it would be more the autumn and winter phase, which modernity doesn't really have much space for those energies. They're coming in and descending and composting and fermenting and dying. So she's doing that. So the lining of the uterus is actually like peeling, but because we have those because we still think that thoughts are just in our heads. Like, for example, Bonnie Bonita Roy would say something like, thought is the movement the body does. So if that is true, if thoughts is the movement the body does, then if your body is building things during a phase of the cycle and it's dying, like decomposing things in another phase of the cycle, it will produce a type of emotional pattern, will produce a type of thought pattern that, if, of course, if you overlay that on top of what's happening in your life, you can have like more negative, inverted commas, negative thinking associated that comes up in phases of the cycle that have the the felt experience of winter and dark and death, because those energies, they feel heavier. They have a felt experience in the body that is heavier, but it doesn't have to be negative. But when they interface with modernity, they're at odds with modernity. So then a woman is very push and pull in that phase of the cycle. So then um usually a woman judges herself or she ridicules herself, and then if her partner or people, even the people that are trying to do good, they'll be like, it's okay, she's just PMSing, it's fine. And then a woman would laugh and say, yeah, I'm just in my PMS, it's okay. So in the end,
It
we
just
end up,
invalidates any truth or any. It invalidates the entire experience, I guess, by just being like, and that's, I guess, where the word crazy goes. It's just like, oh, I was just being crazy, or I get crazy if I go to the shopping center. It's like a way of, because I guess we have no map of this. You know what I mean? It's like, as a society, we've lost whatever map we had of this cyclical experience, and so the only like remnants of a map we have are like, we put the word crazy on that because it's just the intensity's there. And then, yeah, I guess what was coming to my mind as you were talking is that like modernity kind of wants a never ending summer of like extroverted cheeriness is kind of what it is. And then
yeah,
the other side of it, like the autumnal winter thing, it seemed like a very introverted kind of neurotic thing, or like you're very sensitive to whatever variations that are going on. So you're, yeah, which I guess if you think about it, it's when you're cheery and happy, you can kind of, you've got like a stronger ego, so you're more able to take things that might not be good for you. You know, you're kind of able to like, oh yeah, it's fine, and I'll plow on,
yeah,
and it's okay. Whereas when you're feeling more sensitive or like your energies are lower, then those things get in and you're kind of like, oh, maybe I need to have boundaries, or maybe I need to change. There is kind of like truths that can be within that when you're sensitive, that like you kind of go, oh yeah, actually I shouldn't have let that be a thing. But when you're high mood and you're feeling like effective and all that, you can kind of overlook them because like the thicker ego skin kind of like lets you shed it a bit, which is an interesting yeah, those were just some thoughts that were kind of coming in as you were talking about that.
that's absolutely, yeah, that's correct. And also like um and also, for example, what that lack of understanding from modernity, where that leaves women, is that it's very hard for us to be masterful, because it is, um where we are in culture is so not is just treating us as, like you're saying, like never ending summer, or more linear, more testosterone like, all that kind of stuff. So then it means that um for us, for a lot of women, we kind of, we don't really surf our waves. We have all these waves and we're just like being thrown every time that a woman is feeling something that's not matching what she thinks she should be. Like she has become an abstract idea of what she should be. So for example, sometimes I even say that that goes as far, it goes into our medical systems, into our interventions, into our model of mental health. So the way that psychiatry operates, like a lot of psychiatry has no understanding of the cycle, has no understanding of perimenopause, has no understanding of anything, and then just gives woman lithium or whatever it is to bring her back, and so it's always bringing her back, to something, and
Mm.
that normalcy of bringing her back to something is has never been what was her model of being back into normality, her normal. So and then on top of that, now that we have, for example, the trans phenomena, right, the transitioning. So even if we bring this, and I had a conversation with Layman last week for his podcast with two trans friends of ours, and 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 I love jamming with them because they can make the hormones very visible, like because it's so drastic, like the transition from testosterone to, the opposite, or so they can talk to me
The
about those transitions.
phenomenological felt experience is like so obvious to them because they have, yeah, because they're
They
taking
have
the hormones
also
that
there. They were one and they're moving towards the other. So for example, in our transitioning protocol, what's normal is to give like if a man is like, okay, if a person that was born in a male body wants to become a trans woman, or is a trans woman and wants to take hormones, they'll be advised to take estrogen, only estrogen. So that's part of the protocol, or to take
mm,
one dose of progesterone. It's very arbitrary. Like they don't really understand at this point in our culture. We don't even understand that to be a woman and to have the psyche produced by this oscillation. What produces our minds is the oscillation of contrasts. It is the contrast between one set of hormones to another set of hormones. But our mechanistic model focuses either on hormone. Let's zoom in and explore estrogen, instead of like, nobody does like zooms in and out and go, ah, how does the contrast of oscillating for 40 years of your life, what type of mind does that generate? What type of philosopher does that person become? What type of thinker is that person? Because the oscillation gives her uh, elasticity that is different to what produces the male subjectivity. So that
that's so
is
interesting.
like, I find that interesting, and
That's
I'm like,
fascinating. Yeah.
we're being robbed. I think what I get sad about, apart from, you know, just seeing a lot of women having to apologize for being them. So every time they are in deep connection with their body, they feel that they're failing. So a woman would say, I'm sorry, I still have my baby brain. I just gave birth. Instead of like, wow, I'm fascinated. I have my baby brain. It's like my brain is doing all these wonderful things. But we don't have a place to land in culture. So we're constantly apologizing. So then what happens is that we create generations of insecure women with their subjectivity. We're insecure of how our minds work, and as long as our minds is not operating in the way that's has good feedback from modernity, we ostracize that side of ourselves, or we excuse that side of ourselves. So I get sad because, um, I say in my book that the female psyche, this oscillation of the female mind, is becoming a species in extinction because, one, she's not um, being able to sit in that mind and work with that mind. And modernity has also offered women a lot of ways to not even have to, inverted commas, deal with their mind. So we have the pill. And if you have the pill, then you don't have the oscillation. We have hormone replacement therapy. Again, you don't have the oscillation. You just, if, you know,
So can we dig down on that a little bit? Because I'm curious what the pill and other, like, IUDs or, like, what other contraceptive, because I guess the pill is, like, the main one that people are taking, or there's, like, the injection, or there's,
yeah.
so what effect are those? Are those all working in the same way? Well, obviously the coil is working a different way, but, like, are the pill and those kind of contraceptives working by manipulating a certain hormone? And then,
Yeah.
yeah, what effect is that having on length of cycle or experience of cycle? And yeah, how is that playing into all this?
Look, there are lots of different pills today. I think in my time when I was taking it, there were much less. And I think, you can probably, people can research and see all the different pills that happen. Like a lot of what the pill does is like stop ovulation, for example. So when you stop ovulation, you stop the production, the natural production of progesterone. But then what you have is also that if you don't have ovulation, you're robbing woman of that incredible phase of her cycle that some women on the pill never have it. Like they just in a particular. It's almost like, it's very tricky to say because the pill interacts with the hormones in different ways. There are different pills that do different things, but what they do is that they're robbing woman of the natural oscillation of her hormones, and they're robbing woman of ovulation. So she basically is robbed of her natural pattern of mind, of thinking, of breathing in and breathing out, of magnetizing and repelling. There are polarities that she
Because it's trying to flatten it into one linear state, just as similar as we can to, like, a masculine kind of consistency, like, or, like, to whatever the
yeah.
system is demanding of us. But then what you're really interested in is the female psyche, the woman's psyche, as the oscillation, as this, not just being one or the other, or just being like it's this and this hormone. It's what the tidal
It's
element
the
of
title,
being, yeah.
exactly. It's the title, because for example, Um, and a man, let's call it linear, but of course it's not linear because testosterone has a whole different way of interacting with the environment than the female hormones. So estrogen we don't produce more estrogen every time we see a good looking man, for example, or we just have the same amount. And so on some level, our hormone levels is pretty consistent. It just oscillates, but it's pretty consistent. Whereas testosterone oscillates. Like if you see an attractive woman, you have more testosterone. If there is the prospect of having sexual encounter, you have more testosterone. After sex, you have more testosterone. You have your favorite team is playing, and you win that match. Even if you're not playing, you're watching it. You have more testosterone.
Really?
So,
Wow,
so you
that's so
have you
interesting.
can see, and then fathers that take care of their children decrease the level of testosterone. So then they're less in their let's call it ferocious uh, male, but they're more caretaking male. So there's a different rhythm being created with a man and testosterone. Whereas for women, other hormones are get produced, like oxytocin and different things get produced, but the levels of estrogen and progesterone don't increase by sexual encounters or something like that. So there's some reliability in our oscillation, but in the modern model, we intervened with those. So it's very. So today, for example, what do we have today? We have a bunch of our elders, so my elders, they were never initiated into any of that. Um, so they can't, so they coped in a particular way. But then we have nowadays is so normalized hormone replacement therapy. So what happens with hormone replacement therapy? When my body is weaning of estrogen and progesterone and stops being a fertile woman's body, which has this oscillation, which on some levels is fascinating and produces a certain type of mind. This mind is a mind more attuned to her immediate surroundings. So you can imagine in a tribal setting, a woman would be very attuned to her babies, to the well-being or the health of the little people in the tribe. She's very yeah, she's just very attuned to the present. And I say that to me, it makes absolute sense that hormones that change every day would give the woman the perfect situation to not be bored by the present. So for a woman to be in the ever present now, like, so for example, a woman that's reading Eckhart Tolle, be in the present, being in the now, it's a completely different thing for a male mind to try to be in the now with testosterone than for a woman that has every day a tiny little dose of a different hormone that gives her a different now, a different now, a different now. So I think that there is something to the cultivation of being in the present that was very required for women in a tribal setting, to attune to the little people and to the inverted commas boring things of life. They're never boring for her because she's this. It's all conducive to being in the present. You know, attuning to the little cry of the baby, to what's happening, to the nuances of the plants and to the foraging. Whereas the male testosterone is much more. It's much more a spiky energy, you know. It goes out, and when you have threat, testosterone pieces through threat. So testosterone can increase with threat, so it can give male a courage to force through something that's scary. Whereas for a woman to survive in nature, she would be more connected to the web of other women, to attune to the noise, to be more quiet. So if a woman's more quiet when she's threatened and a man is more outward, and if this is like something that happens in modernity, that all of us are somewhat a little bit threatened, you can see that maybe the male voices would be louder, and this louder way of piercing the world would be more um, common. And for a woman, she would recoil more. So then you can see that in our systems today. And then the menopausal woman, which would be the woman that's not had by those hormones. And then again, she went through a different rite of passage. Her brain learns how to wean of the oscillation and develops new neural pathways that give her like the grandmother energy, like the matriarch. I call the matriarch energy, which is an energy that has learned her subjectivity from the oscillation, but now she's not subjected to it. She can look at it from the outside. So when she can look at it from the outside, she's a great mechanism for any society or tribal setting to kind of like stop testosterone. So the impulse of testosterone, you know, like, I don't know if you know Jamie Wheel, but he would say things like, if men are made to fuck, fight, and build, but who to fuck, when to fight, and what to build is not up to them. And what I see is that is the job of the matriarch. She helps. We are meant to create together. Male and female energies are meant to create the systems and the world together. And when we are in our inverted commas best game, then the matriarch of a tribe would yield the energy of the impulsive young male that has a lot of building energy or fighting energy or fucking energy, whatever it is. She would be able to stop that energy and say, you can do that, but is it important to do that? Should you be doing that now? And she holds people into account. Like, she's attuned to morality in a way that is not a thought or an abstraction, but is morality of the rhythms of life, of when things need to die, when things need to birth, when things need to, the same way that a woman knows when her baby should be born, but our system tells her when her baby should be born.
Yeah.
You know, a woman knows when to breastfeed her baby, but now we have to breastfeed on the clock so she can go back to work.
It's
You
interesting
know?
because it's like, it's kind of, you're saying the matriarch is kind of the values container, where or kind of the almost the orienting, the steering thing of like, hey, this is what you should be pointing that intense, yeah, building energy towards. But now it's almost like, because I don't even know that it's men that are. I feel like the system has almost become its own thing that is self-organizing and has created its own value system and its own attractors and its own. It's like we're living in an inhuman thing. And the articles, I remember Scott Alexander had one on meditations on Malach, and people kind of create these metaphors out of gods as these
Mm,
ways of trying to like capture that very strange thing of this non-human value system that's kind of like, hey, we need to work by clocks and we need to do this. And there's been these predictions, Marx in the 19th century, Keynes in 1930s, saying we've done, actually even in the 18th century when James Watts made the steam engine, they've all made these predictions that like, well, that's the end of work. You know what I mean? Like very soon we've made the
mm,
machines that now are going to be able
mm,
to handle our needs. Like it's amazing. But
mm,
instead what's happened is it's just there's more and more things we need. There's more and more widgets to sell. And so there always seems to be the state of scarcity never seems to have gone away, and instead it seems to have ratcheted up, and the competitive thing seems to have ratcheted up. So it's become almost this inhuman thing. So the matriarch, or like whatever steering thing, is kind of,
mm,
and I guess this is what I'm talking about, is just modernity, right? That is just
mm,
the thing that has kind of taken possession of our humanity and has steered us in a very particular direction. And I guess,
mm,
men are very good servants for that, because
mm,
like in the way that you're talking about like the spikiness of testosterone, it's almost much easier to lead on because you just
mm,
create a salience environment that's pulling you towards, oh, this is the thing you should be, you know, directing that intense energy towards. Whereas women, I guess, are kind of in the position of like for a few days a month, for 4 days a month, I'm really on board with that. But then
mm,
other than that, it's kind of being cut out. So
mm,
yeah, it's a
mm,
really kind of it's a stark kind of vision. And seeing, do
mm.
you see hope in this, tapping into the feminine cyclicity, like this other way, this other biological rhythm? Do you see a kind of a layman describing you as a menstrual futurist? Do you see a future of hope with, around this?
Yeah, absolutely. I do see hope. I do see hope, but I don't know when. Like it's enough to move me and move to do this work. Because, for example, when I talk to you, when I'm talking to laymen and different um, men that tell me, "Oh, I wasn't so familiar with that, but I'm interested." That shows me that a lot of what we attribute to fight or domination in a particular way, yes, there are, you know, horrible men out there, and there are not so great women. Like, but there's a lot of people that we are under this blanket of not understanding one another and making a lot of assumptions uh, because of the systems or the way that we have been brought up, and just out of like, oh, that didn't even occur to me. Like, if you don't have a body that bleeds every month, you don't have to think about it. If your mom didn't tell you, you're not going to think about it. And if your mom didn't tell you, you're going to assume it's nothing really because she didn't tell you. And if your wife is not really doing anything much about it, so there's a lot of assumptions there. And when I sit with women, there's a lot of things that we haven't shared with men. That's our part in the dynamic of patriarchy. It's women being silent because of threats or because of whatever. We don't share necessarily like how difficult some aspects have been. And like, so some women go like, oh, I have to work, so I'm not going to tell my boss that I have cramps. I just take pills, so the boss never knows that he's doing anything. So this has become the system, is a disembodied thing. But once you start having these conversations, then, and if you start just in your own grassroots way having these conversations, like in the book that I'm writing, I talk about spell breaking and breaking the spell of modernity. And the spell breaking is through conversation and grassroots. And it's fascinating because if you start having these conversations, then we see how the spell took root, where women, disconnected from themselves to cope with modernity, where men made assumptions about women that are not really true, where women allowed men to believe some things about them that weren't true, and they allowed them to create this model of what it is to have a relationship. So there's all, I think that the solution is really in us getting together and having conversations, and then with your own little group of friends going like, how was your first period? I'm curious. Or is it okay if I ask you that? Do you get embarrassed if I ask you that? And if a woman gets embarrassed, then it's interesting. Oh, wow, you're embarrassed. Okay, I'm sorry. And then these conversations start, and then we can see how young we are in these conversations, how awkward we are. We're so
Yeah.
like big and mature, but we're actually so young in some areas. And I think that that's when I talk about, like, some people use the frame of post-tragic, the pre-tragic,
Yeah,
tragic,
I've heard
post.
Jamie Wheel talking about that, yeah.
So the post-tragic world to me has to actually bring us into an awareness that in relationship to the menstrual cycle, in modernity, we're not even in the tragic. I mean, we're not even in the tragic is when you recognize there is a problem and you have to go like, fuck, there is a problem. In modernity, we're not even there. In modernity, we're like cruising along, just like, oh, there's problem with the climate, there's a problem with wars, problem with this and that, but there's no problem that we're all educated as if we are abstracted beings of a neutral gender that works with everyone, for everyone. And I'm saying this is a massive problem because thoughts are sexed and behavior is sexed, and we're not even there yet. If I say things like that, it can be triggering in some spaces because women have had to pretend. We had to pretend or to mute our sexed nature to enter a sex neutral workspace. So but
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
it's like polite society and like the mores as well have kind of, especially think of the way like Victorian society would have been characterized, that which is I guess the beginning of the modern age of like the, oh, you don't talk about that kind of thing, we don't talk about that kind of thing, and it seems like, yeah, it seems like now we're more okay with talk, or at least there's more of these conversations happening. I've never had that outside of romantic partners. I've never had that conversation with women in my life. So, but
Mm,
even at
mm,
that, yeah, because I'm like, I'd be curious, but I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of a thing of there is a line of politeness being, yeah, of
mm,
uncertainty about whether there is a line being crossed there, and so it's like, oh, don't want to intrude by asking that. But as you say, that's such, and obviously science has done that as well. Like, I
mm,
wonder where, but I also wonder how much is it just like the map thing, where it's just like we just don't have, we never thought to make a map of this. It's just like, oh, we're studying human psychology. Oh, we're just gonna, the problem in psychology being most of psychological studies have been done on students, usually white, usually like 18 to 20. So it's like most of our, what we consider human psychology, you might have a massive n number of like thousands of people that you've studied, but they're all the exact same cohort. And now we're realizing, oh, we've kind of flattened things into a very thing. And then I think there is an attitude then where you're like, oh, we've realized that actually our map was completely, lacking. So now we need to open it up. So maybe there's a hopeful thing of like becoming aware that this is such a gap in our knowledge. Maybe there is a
mm,
thing of like, hey, we need to figure this out, and it would be, yeah,
mm,
I wonder, could it become more of a thing of like comfortable conversation, or like something much
mm,
more talked about? Probably if there was more that we knew, because like because you're coming with so much knowledge, I'm able to be like, what about this, what about, oh, that's so
mm,
interesting, and
mm,
it's kind of been able to have some kind of maps about it, which makes,
mm,
I guess, even knowing what questions to ask, or even having
mm,
questions to ask, because otherwise, it's just a wall of like, I don't know what's there. There's a million other things that I need to figure out because life is complex. So it is like a really interesting. I like the hopeful note of like, hey, maybe we're just figuring this out, and by actually having conversations, we can begin to figure it. But it also seems like, from a societal level, the fact that women's cycles, if all women were synced up in their cycles,
Mm,
like, you know what I mean? We could maybe, it's like a
mhm,
weird, it's like the idea of restructuring society with this
mm,
cyclical knowledge seems
mm,
dazzlingly complex. I suppose it depends on
mm.
what your values to try and do, but like the fact that like women are going to be better at doing certain things at different parts of their cycle. And then it's like, I'm, I'm imagining being like a CEO or a manager and being like, how do we structure it around so we're getting the most out of everyone and the best for everyone? It's like, oh my God, if we just pretend like everyone is one cookie cutter thing, it's like, even at that, the complexity is like enough, but it's like dazzling to think how much is involved in that, like the complexity of that.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think that the way we have dealt with complexity is by pretending it doesn't exist. It's like, oh, it's too complex. Let's put it that way. And I'm thinking this way is getting us into trouble. So now we have to look at it and go like, it's really complex. But maybe there are models that we don't even know of work or of being that we don't even know. But if every woman honored her like body when I run my retreats, for example, a lot of women that start learning how to be with their bodies in rhythm, then they come back to me and say, now that I know how to honor my body and I can see how much darkness I have because I have to go to work or I have to do this, I still can't do anything about it because the system can't hold me. Like I still need to pay my bills. I'm still a single parent. I'm still so I we get trapped a lot because there's no, but I think the grassroots little models, like we can't just go like, what's the good of knowing that and can't do anything about it? Well, I think that's the first step. The first step is making what's unconscious conscious, and then we're like, oh, we do have a problem, and oh my God, look at how many times I cope during the month. Look how many times I cope during the year. Look how many times I'm aggressive because I'm putting stress hormones in my body that I at this moment, that's the last thing I want to do. So if you start just noticing how much you cope, how much yes you say to things that you are kind of killing yourself, then at least that's the beginning of the conversation. And I think that, you know, there are lots of little models, like it's all grassroots. I really think that's on some levels, the solutions are going to come from little pockets of individuals trying to do work in a particular way and getting to know each other in a particular way. So here in my community where I live, a bunch of us started gardening together. And through gardening together, we're getting to know each other. Like we're getting to know the quiet voices in a different way because we only met in social events and these people were always stressed out. But when we meet gardening, they're really good with their hands and then their wisdoms comes through. So I think that there are different ways to meet one another. Then modernity just flattened. And I think that inverted commas, like some solutions will come out. But I think I'm becoming much more vocal now because I I say in my book and I say in my workshops that the matriarch energy, which is the post-menopausal woman, to to counter the energy of somebody as quick as Elon Musk with technology that is going so quick with so much money and so much power, we need a lot of women. One woman is not going to do much. So it's like it's a collective that wakes up. It's a whole entire collective of women that all of a sudden go like, what the fuck? Like we need there's something else. And then from this something else, I think that just interesting little solutions will happen. And I can see in my community models of that, like women that took their kids out of school because the system wasn't working and they're homeschooling and creating a new model of education. Tiny little tiny small, but it's starting to get traction. So that's little alternatives to modernity are starting to birth from pockets of women that are going like, I'm not gonna put my body on the line anymore. I'm not gonna do that way. It doesn't feel right anymore. And then they're working with men. They're working together with their partners, with people that are open to hearing them. Like, what are you picking up on? Oh, my son has diarrhea every time he goes to school. That's not good. That can't be good. And the husband's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then, there are different things happening from that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
there's so much, yeah, like and I think there's like a level of virality that happens when, because women are going to be like, oh, it's like knowledge that rather than having to disregard it, like throw the label of like, oh, I was crazy at that point and then disregarding that, it's able, those maps will go kind of viral or spread through people. And I guess that's what's happening. Like you're writing a book that is essentially trying to create that kind of a map, I guess, is it?
Yeah, it's trying to do that. Sorry, I just have a commitment in a little
Yeah,
bit, but I was just
we will wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. I guess that's a great, like, talking about the book is kind of a great way to wrap up. Is the book something? What is the book about, and when is that coming?
so, yeah, thanks for asking. The book, it was a very interesting thing to write a book during perimenopause because again, people don't understand perimenopause, but perimenopause, like my brain is shifting and it's weaning of hormones, and so it's not linear. And I really wanted to write my book linear, and like I'm fighting modernity because I interjected modernity in me, and then this book has been a journey in itself, and the book is a lot about the spell of modernity and trying to show and showing the matriarch as one of the spell breaker. Basically, she's the spell breaker, and she can come in and intervene and share elements, because I say about the broken lineage, and there are a lot of women in my generation and the generation prior to mine and even future generations still come from this broken lineage. So the matriarch, this collective of women, can go, oh, I didn't learn how to do this, but I'm going to teach the young ones. So she's trying to repair the lineage from the middle without having had the lineage. So we are and the example that I give in the book is that, like, she's an intervention force, like the way that I don't know if you're familiar with the Yellowstone National Park in America, when they brought in the wolves back. So the wolves there were no wolves in the Yellowstone National Park, and they noted the river banks were completely eroded, and a lot of species had died, and the plants had died. And then they tried to do an intervention, which is simply bringing, I think they brought like 7 wolves, like something small, and they just put the wolves there. But just bringing the wolves there brought the awareness to the deer that there was threat. And just the awareness to the deer that there was threat, the deer started hiding a little bit more. So they wouldn't be going to the riverbanks. They would be going more in other paths. So then the banks got restored and plants were able to take root. And through that, little birds came and otters came, and the whole ecosystem came alive because one little species was introduced in a small number. So that's kind of what I'm proposing. I
So
say that
the matriarch of the
the matriarch
wolves.
is not alive in modernity. Like, there's no counter energy to Putin or to Trump, or nothing that can. And it's very difficult because we're not even valued to have that like, he can ridicule that really quickly. So it's really tricky, but I think that there's something being formed, is an energy being formed to be able to act in the world in a way that the structures will bring morality back, will bring a morality back, which I mean valuing life as opposed to money, or valuing health of relationships, and money
Human
too, but
values. Yeah.
exactly, bringing the human values back. So that's what the book's all about, and
So
I'm still.
is the book out already? Has it already been?
No, it's in the editing phase. I'm working with my editor. She's a dear friend and amazing woman called Leah Harrow, and she's editing. She's helping me, you know, yeah, we're bringing some things back, and I hope that at the end of the year the book will be edited and published. I don't
Amazing.
know.
So where can people find your work in the meantime, and where can they hear about all things
Um,
Adriana Forte?
so I've got a platform at Substack called the C Lab. So you can go to Substack and find C Lab. I'm restructuring it because I'm bringing uh, bits of the book now to C Lab, and that's how I'm gonna start doing. So weekly, I'm gonna put articles, bits that are gonna not make the book, bits that are gonna make into the book, and then I'm gonna start maybe in a couple of months having spell breaking sessions in C-Lab so people can become a subscriber, and then we can hash this out, because C-Lab is a lab for a cyclically informed society. So I want people to just go like, if I have these conversations, people get triggered. How do I have these conversations? So we can lab it, so we can understand how to break the spell in our own lives, in our own
Amazing.
systems. Yeah.
Great. Oh, I'll link that down in the description. And I guess last question, is there any other thinker who you'd like to amplify, who you would love for the world to hear more from?
The two people come to mind, and maybe one of them you would know more than the other. I mean, there's lots of people, because I think my work is amplifying a lot of the people that modernity doesn't give opportunity to, because it can't capture their voices. So a lot of my work is to highlight the voices of women and also marginalized voices. But so one of them, I'd say Bonita Roy. Maybe you even know her. She's not a
Heard the
marginalized
name, yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
She's a philosopher, and I don't think she wouldn't call herself like a female philosopher, but her thinking comes from a body that has cycled, and it's easy to see that she's an older woman, post-menopause, but you can see that what she's bringing forth is very different than male philosophy. So to me, that's and she's very she comes from she's Whiteheadian, but
Oh, very cool.
which
Yeah.
is also a process, which is also a cyclically, you know,
It was very much that was coming to mind, like process ontology
yeah,
versus the normal kind of Cartesian ontology,
exactly,
very much with the cyclical thing that fit in. Yeah, Bonita
exactly.
Roy, that
So
sounds
she's great, and also there's another woman that's called Tracy Chipman, and she's somebody that probably wouldn't come to your radar, because she's a storyteller, and she's uh into myth, and so she expresses things in a very female, beautiful way that I think society is just learning to attune to that type of energy as a learning, as a teaching, as something of value. We usually put that in the basket of oh, that's beautiful, but that's not so important for systems or whatever. And I'm saying, no, actually those voices, they come and they have a lot to teach us. So Tracy, we're friends, and also
amazing.
we collaborated. So yeah, you
Love
can
it.
look her.
Thank you for both of those, and thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, it went on much longer than I originally intended, partly with a break in the middle, but just so fascinating. And so yeah, I mean, just so much to learn, and I guess we're, as a society, we have so much to learn as well. So thank you so much for sharing all that. It was wonderful.
Thank you, James. It was great to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Lovely stuff. Thank you.